Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Paul Norton, Superintendent here at Lake Travis, and we're honored to have you join us tonight in this community conversation about a very important topic. And we know this is a very busy time of the year for everybody, so we do appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be here with us tonight to have this conversation, because there's never a bad time to talk about student safety. And so tonight we're going to have those conversations. You'll hear from some amazing panelists this evening talking about their experiences and the opportunities that we have as a community. We're very fortunate that we haven't had any fentanyl-related incidents in our schools this year, and we want to keep that going. We don't want to lapse and not have that opportunity. And so tonight is the start of a conversation about this topic, and so we want to make sure that we continue this. We'll have conversations next school year about this as well, even with our students. So we want to make sure that we're continuing that in the years ahead. And so tonight we'll be recording this event. It'll be on our website, so everybody will have the opportunity to see it in the days ahead. And so we look forward to getting a lot of clicks and links to that website as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen, and they're going to go through and start our presentation. So thank you so much for being here this evening.
I'm going to start by passing the microphone down to our panelists, and each of them is going to introduce themselves and share a little bit of information about fentanyl from their position of expertise and association with it. So we'll start with Stephanie.
Hi everyone, thank you guys for coming. I know I am a mom. I have 2 high school students and an elementary student. And I know how busy this time of year is. And when Lake Travis reached out to us, we looked at the schedule and it was really hard to find time. Where do we fit this in? And it was so important, this information is so important, that we didn't want to go into the summer without giving you guys an opportunity to hear this information. As she said, I'm Stephanie Turner. I'm the founder of Texas Against Fentanyl. 19 months ago, I lost my firstborn and only son, Tucker Rowe, to one illicit Percocet pill that was purchased on social media. And this is Tucker. And 2 years ago was the first time he was introduced to a pill, and it was at a New Year's Eve party. He was 18 years old, and he came home from that party and he told me that he took a pill and his friend said that he quit breathing. So we had a conversation about what he took, and he told me it was a Xanax. He thought it was a Xanax, and so did I. And I chalked it up to a teenage view of being relaxed and passing out. Didn't know about fentanyl. Had I known, I would have known to talk more in depth about it, and I didn't understand the addiction component of it. And from that point, that one pill, that one time, led us down a road of struggle for the next 9 months. Over the next 9 months, he had used on and off. A total of the 9 months, he was sober 6 of them. However, after 4 months of sobriety and 2 treatment centers later, he chose to purchase one more pill, and 2 days before he was set to compete in a triathlon with his dad, he took a lethal dose of fentanyl and was found dead. So that is what drove me to start Texas Against Fentanyl, because we're not given this information. As parents, we don't have this information to tell our children about it. So we're in this weird world right now where kids have more information about drugs than we do, and how can we lead our kids if we don't know? And so awareness is the antidote, is what we say with Texas Against Fentanyl, and we're really passionate about spreading that. We also work with support families who are in grief, and we are driving legislative change at the Capitol right now to bring in fentanyl education for our students. So that's kind of the heartbeat of our org and what we do, and so thank you all for being here.
My name is Carrie Lou Bell. I am a mom also. My children are older. I also lost my oldest son. All my children grew up out here. I raised my children here, and they all are Lake Travis alumni. My children are 32, 37, and Casey was 44 when he passed. Casey was born and raised in Austin. I tell everyone he was born with orange blood because he was a huge Texas Longhorn fan. And he loved Lake Travis as much as he loved the Longhorns. He couldn't get away from Lake Travis. So he worked hard out here. He played hard out here. He loved wakeboarding. He loved everybody he met. Some of you he may look a little familiar to you because he worked out here at the big restaurants and bars. But he was also an avid athlete. He worked out ferociously, and when he would injure himself, go to the hospital, what would they do? Prescribe prescription painkillers. And therefore, he had an addiction to them. So when he would work out too hard or injure himself, he would go seeking pain pills. He tried other drugs, I'm sure, throughout his, teenager, 20s, 30s, but he wasn't into drugs. It was just the pills that he sought when he needed to self-medicate himself. He had been suffering from depression and anxiety, and we'd been discussing, there's doctors out there to treat that. The morning I found him in his condo, he had written in his daytimer, make doctor's appointment. And he didn't make it to the doctor. He somehow found a source that provided a Valium, what he thought was a Valium, and it was laced with fentanyl. I found out, I didn't know what fentanyl was. I found out 90 days later with the toxicology report that it was fentanyl. So I'm here today to tell you that it doesn't matter the age of your child. A lot of these young teenagers are losing their lives because they're experimenting for the first time, like we probably all did. And I think most teenagers are out there, the students, like Stephanie said, they know about fentanyl, and it's time that the parents know about it so you can be on the lookout.
My name's Mike Prather. I'm actually the Assistant Chief of Operations for Lake Travis Fire Rescue. I started the fire department here in 1999, so I've been out here and watched it grow a little bit. I have 3 children. My oldest, Kyle, graduated high school in Burnet, was an avid football player, sports, joined the Marines, went through the Marine Corps, got out, loved to do metal fab, so he built metal buildings. First one up in the morning. On October 18th of 2021, his mom came home and found him passed out in the garage and called me. I was here at work. I told her to hang up, call 911. She actually tried to revive him with CPR for about 9 minutes before the ambulance got there. Neither one of us had any idea that he liked to take Xanax or Valium off and on, and apparently he bought a Xanax and took it. He had been home. He was on his way. He had reunited with a Marine buddy, was going to move to Montana, work with him. My daughter came home. They had a conversation. He was cooking chicken. He had gotten up that morning, ran about 2 miles to the gym, worked out, ran back home. He had no idea that that pill was going to take his life. In his mind, he was going to probably take it and play video games for the rest of the evening. And he was just he was with us, wrapping up a few things for a few weeks. He had moved out of his apartment, and it was just shocking because being a firefighter, I can't tell you how many overdoses I've worked, and I was very open with my kids about the dangers of heroin and methamphetamines and all these things. I use fentanyl to give to patients for pain, and I never really equated to that these pills are out there that people are manufacturing just with some baking soda and a press, and they throw fentanyl in it, and if somebody thinks they're buying a Valium or a Xanax, and that's not what it is, and they may be buying it from a friend or a trusted, what they feel is a trusted source, and it's just being in emergency services for 25 years, I thought I knew everything, and had no idea that was happening, and so I would like to do whatever I can to educate people, educate kids, and just get the word out.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sally Hernandez. I'm your Travis County Sheriff, and I am honored to be here tonight with everybody. This is a very important topic, as you have heard from the people that have previously talked. It's very important to me that TCSO be part of a collaborative solution to save lives, and I believe that has to be done through education and through enforcement. The ME's report just came out, and for 2022, For the second year in a row, the number of fentanyl deaths in Travis County has more than doubled. And more than half of all overdose deaths in Travis County last year were fentanyl related. The number of deaths in our jurisdictions has been increasing, and overdose calls are so prevalent, it's more than ever. You know, in fact, first responders they rarely work a shift where there's not, that they go without having an overdose call. So teens are confident that when they're taking Xanax, Adderall, or Percocet, it's their fake pills, and they look just like regular pills. I want to make it clear that these are really great kids who are falling victim to fentanyl. A student who is stressed out about final exams, they'll buy one single Xanax pill to get a good night's sleep and never wake up because it wasn't Xanax. That's why the slogan "one pill can kill" is being used, and we've got to work together to find solutions. And I am so thankful that these parents are stepping up and people are getting together to. I mean, this is a problem that's huge, and we've got to work collaboratively to help save lives here in Travis County.
I usually introduce myself as, "Hi, I'm Dan. I'm an alcoholic and an addict." I think that that's important because this August I'll be celebrating 20 years of sobriety, and in 20 years, thank you. In 20 years of going to these meetings and being of service to others, over the last 4 or 5 years, there's more empty chairs in those meetings. There's more people that gain a little bit of time in sobriety and don't make it. Back when I first got sober, it was, you could go out and experiment. Life would get really bad, but now it's literally just one time, one pill. Traditionally, now I'm a drug and alcohol interventionist, but I'm also an owner of family hospital systems. We have 10 general hospitals. We've got one right up the road on 620. We have 6 here in the Austin area, 2 in San Antonio, 1 in San Antonio, sorry, 2 in Omaha, Nebraska, and 1 in Louisiana. And in that system, we've got a program that I founded called RISE, which is a hospital-based addiction service. So we do things like detox, stabilization, emergency services, but we also do case management, wherein a recovered addict will be in the room with our patients and then stay in touch with those patients for 18 months. So we're kind of watching the whole process from the minute that somebody chooses to get sober, and then you see them 18 months later, and it's pretty powerful to see. Lately, most of the patients we see about 1,500 addiction patients a year, and most of those, if it's not just alcohol, they test positive for fentanyl and they don't even know it. So it's becoming a higher prevalence, and I think if there's anything that I can contribute to this group is, look for the early signs. Don't wait too long. Not saying you have to go get them into treatment right away, but start reaching out to professionals or addicts who have experience with those things. Most of the time with the young kids that we're working with, and there's a lot of them, most of the time that the thing that's preventing them from sobriety is the family. There's a lot of denial, a lot of shame around it. And, I came from an upper middle class family. It can happen to anybody. So if there's any parents out there that are struggling or their family members are struggling, you've got to get rid of the shame and start reaching out to some professionals and just talk about it, get some advice. Most of the time they don't do that, and we end up having more and more deaths. So just start looking for those red flags and start talking to others about it.
Stephanie, I'd like to ask you to please talk to us about how fentanyl works. What's it doing? Why does it work so effectively? How is it that it's so sinister and hard to find? And what does a fentanyl overdose look like when it's happening?
So I'll kind of back it up and we'll do like a little crash course of fentanyl. There's pharmaceutical grade fentanyl that is, used for pain patients, and then there's illicit made manufactured fentanyl. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about fentanyl, is the illicit made. In 2022, 99% of all pills seized by the DEA contained fentanyl. So pills that are bought on social media, if it doesn't come from a doctor, a pharmacy, a package, prescription, count on it having fentanyl in it. Of the 99% of those pills, 60% of them had a lethal amount of fentanyl. 4 grains of salt is a lethal amount. To put that in perspective, 1 packet of sugar is enough to kill 500 people. I had measured out 30 grams of sugar here. This is enough to kill 15,000 people. Okay, so it's really easy. It's added to all drugs. It's being put in all things right now, not exclusive to pills. Primarily, though, pills are where we're seeing it, but it can be added to, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, marijuana, vapes. Fentanyl is added to so many things. So I'm going to take this back to what I wish I knew. In 2014, it's kind of hard to see on the left up, it shows the percentage of deaths, drug-involved deaths, and on the bottom it shows the age, and it's 15 and under all the way up to 75 and older. And there's methamphetamine, heroin, benzos, cocaine, and the yellow is fentanyl. So you can see the amount of fentanyl deaths in 2014. Now fast forward 7 years later, in 2021, that's the year that all of our sons died. This is why we're here. This is not okay. This statistic is awful, and in 2022, it's far worse. The CDC is backlogged on data because so many people are dying. This is a threat to our community. It's a threat to everyone, and if you don't leave here and sound the alarm and be scared for our kids' lives, then you didn't take away what you need to tonight, because we need to be scared. And I don't mean that to be a fear-mongering parent because I lost my child. I wish I understood, and I wish our kids could understand, because they're being preyed upon on this. And their kids, they don't have the understanding to make this. Fentanyl comes in the way of, it's not like, oh, my kid has drank too much and you notice they're drunk, or they have the munchies because they smoked weed. Your kid goes to bed, they take a pill at night, and they don't wake up in the morning. That's what it looks like. That's how it happens. And it's being sold on social media. It's easier for our kids to get pills on social media than to order a burger from Whataburger. It's that easy. It's right here, right now. And I just cannot stress that enough. I'm not saying that everyone is using drugs, but I want to take it to this next slide here. In 2001, shows that the blue line is the amount of teenagers using drugs. And you can see that is steadily going down, and it's actually, in 2019, dropping. The yellow line is the death rate of children using drugs. Look in 2019, it skyrocketed. So we know kids are using drugs less than ever before, and we know that they're dying at record rates. This is the #1 cause of death among 18 to 49-year-olds, and the #1 age group that's being hit right now are 14-year-olds. Ages 2 and under, the death rate has gone up 50%. These are babies that are being contaminated, they're getting in contact with fentanyl. No one is exempt from this. So what fentanyl does is it causes a mass amount of dopamine to be released into the brain. If anyone's had any surgery, you've been given that medication, you feel that like euphoric feeling. That is what they feel. So what looks like in their brain is all their worries go away. It's very short lasting. Our bodies metabolize fentanyl quickly. So they feel this euphoric high where nothing matters. They get to sleep, they're resting. That's what it feels like. But what's happening is the fentanyl binds to the receptors in your brain, and that's what controls your central nervous system. So when fentanyl is on those receptors, your body cannot breathe. But your brain is not allowing your body to breathe. So I found my son in a drug poisoning situation where he is blue, lifeless, his pupils are pinpoint, he's frothing at the mouth, he's in a seizure state, his jaw, I cannot even get in to do CPR. Say, Tucker. I could not wake him up. It's not like throw water on his face. At that moment, the only thing you can do is administer naloxone. Naloxone is an opioid antagonist. It comes in, it pushes the fentanyl off of those receptors, and that is what allows the body to breathe. That's why that's why having naloxone is so important. So people view that like, well, if I have Narcan, then I'm encouraging drug use. You guys, we have fire extinguishers in our house, not because we're trying to light our house on fire. We put our seatbelts on not because we're looking for a car crash. If you have an EpiPen and you have a peanut allergy, you're not trying to eat peanuts. You have it in the event of something happening. And that's why we need Narcan. Naloxone, you can get it at a pharmacy. There's a standing order where you can go and get it through your insurance. It does require a prescription. You don't need a doctor for it. So there is also a nationwide shortage of naloxone right now. I know that was like a whole bunch of information, but all this information means so much, because when we can understand it, when we have a deeper understanding, when we take away the stigma, when we're not like, oh, that's a bad kid, that's a drug addict, that's a bad mom, that's this. These are kids just wanting to chill. This is who it's hitting. And I think it's super important that we kind of, take that away. This can happen to anyone. I work with a family right now in Plano. Their 16-year-old daughter had a friend over. They went upstairs in their bedroom. She had no history of drug use at all. They walk in an hour and a half later. Their daughter's dead, and the friend is almost dead. How does this happen? This is happening because they have access to drugs like never before. And the people who are selling the drugs are oftentimes their peers. My son's drug dealer was a 19-year-old boy. He's also linked to 2 other deaths, so 3 deaths. He now is in prison waiting a 20 years to life jail sentence. That doesn't make me happy. He lost his life to fentanyl too. He's a young boy making foolish decisions. The addiction is so strong that he was willing to take that risk. I know that was a lot of answer to your question, but.
All right, I'd like to take this opportunity to go back down to you, Dan. Dan, will you talk to us about what Narcan is, how you can obtain it, and is it something that people should have in their home?
Everybody says that, I don't know if you all remember when you were in high school, marijuana is a gateway drug. I'm telling you right now, marijuana is a gateway drug. That's what started for me, started with the prescription pills after an injury in the military, and it just went haywire from there. If my parents would have sat down and had an open conversation with me about, hey, what do you want to know about drugs? The other thing is that like I do with my kids, I have a 14-year-old, I hand her Narcan and I say, do you know how to use this and why you want to use this? So this is what's going to happen if somebody tests a pill and, and prepare and walk her through it. This is how you do CPR. Like Stephanie said, naloxone is an opiate antagonist. And it works by scooping out or flushing out the opioids out of the receptors. The issue with it is that there's 220 different types of fentanyl that we know about right now that are in the state of Texas alone. Each one of them has a different half-life. Each one of them is more effective or less effective than the other. So if you do go and get like the nasal Narcan, I would be prepared to give 2, 3, or sometimes even 4 doses. Recently we worked with a 16-year-old kid that gave his 12-year-old brother a pill who overdosed, and it took 7 nasal Narcan doses for it. There's also other products you can talk to your doctor about. They have like the auto injectors. But that's something that at least buys enough time. It gets enough oxygen to the brain to where emergency services can make it. So I think that it's definitely advisable if you have a teenager in the home or anybody even close to that to just have 1 or 2. I think there's 2 doses in 1 box of Narcan. Have one available in your home or in your car.
Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to meet with ISD public information officers across this entire county. And we were discussing fentanyl and how to educate students and how to educate parents. And one of the things that was said in that meeting that stuck with me is that students know about Narcan. And they're saying, it's fine. I can go ahead and buy these pills because I have Narcan and I'll just narc myself. I'll be fine. Sheriff, I'd like to know what your gut feels whenever you hear a statement like that.
That is so alarming to me because, you know, when somebody has an addiction, and Dan probably could speak on this clearer, but most of the time they're alone, right? There's shame, there's stigma, and so they go and they're by themselves and they take that pill, they do that drug, and when they're alone like that, they're not able to do the Narcan themselves. And really, I think, Mike, you could probably talk about the physiological effect of that better than I can. But to be alone and to think that you can do that is very, very alarming. In fact, many of the calls that we go on where somebody has died and they've died of fentanyl overdose, they're found alone and by themselves.
Right, and so with Narcan, you have to have a pulse for it to work. And if you stop breathing, your heart's going to stop in about 6 or 8 minutes. And so if you find, if a person's unconscious and their heart stopped, Narcan's not going to start their heart. And so basically, you know, fentanyl basically knocks out or any opiate knocks out the respiratory drive, and so the respiratory will just get slower and slower and slower. They become hypoxic. And once you become hypoxic, you don't think straight anyway, so you're not going to think about giving yourself Narcan. So Narcan only works if there's kind of a sober person there to give it, and that person still has a heart rate to circulate that Narcan, because Narcan has no cardiopulmonary effect to it. It doesn't increase heart rate. It doesn't do anything like Stephanie and Dan said. It just binds to the receptors and knocks the opiates off there. And so, yeah, that is very scary. The kids think, well, if I have Narcan on me, I can take this pill, and I'll know if I'm feeling weird enough to, you know, use my Narcan. And that's absolutely not the truth. I mean, I've been to homes where people have OD'd, and there's Narcan in the cabinet. But because once that hypoxia sets in and that euphoria, they don't think about going and grabbing Narcan.
Kind of want to talk about what's being reported and how are we tracking fentanyl deaths. So right now, this is relatively new, so there's not a lot of updated information. So if someone has a heartbeat and they go to the hospital, but they die, they test them for an opioid, but not fentanyl exclusive. So anyone who dies at a hospital, it's not considered a fentanyl death. It's terrifying. There's a lot of people within our group. We have a network of what we call angel families. And so we hear a lot of stories of what's happening. So we know that's not being tracked. We know that those who are without oxygen for long enough that are having brain damage, those are not being tracked. We don't know how many people. So I'll tell you, last week someone from Houston reached out to me. A doctor sent her to us for support. She has a son 6 months ago. He was 27 years old, and he was without oxygen for what they believe to be 7 to 10 minutes. When you have a fentanyl-related brain injury, it affects every single lobe of your brain. So you may have a car accident, you might have, a couple of your lobes affected. But when fentanyl injuries happen, it affects every single lobe as well as your brain stem. So for 5 weeks, her son Jeffrey lived on 22 machines. He had a machine for his heart, his kidneys, his liver, and he's still alive. He's in recovery right now. He cannot walk on his own. He cannot talk. He cannot hold his head up. This is his life. They're praying and believing that his brain will heal. But every single lobe, it's the worst possible brain injury you can have when you're without oxygen for that long because of how it affects the brain. So that's not being tracked either. So we know we have a whole bunch of injuries from fentanyl. We know we have deaths that are not being reported. So the depth of this problem is far, far greater than what the numbers are telling us. So we're really pushing for a COVID-like response. We want to get that information. We think it's really important that if we're not tracking it, then how can we really know the depths of the problem? We know the problem is really, really big. You guys saw the slide of the increase and the group, the demographic of kids that are affected the most, and these are our young kids.
The Travis County Sheriff, I'm so used to saying it, Travis County Medical Examiner's Office last week released last year's annual report. And in that report, fentanyl deaths for the second year in a row in Travis County more than doubled. The number of fentanyl deaths among African Americans was up by 480%. The death rate among women was up 197%. It's doubling on itself every year. And I think I heard Dr. Pinkard say that if you look at it in the last decade, it's over 1,000% growth, because it literally has just exploded in that decade.
I did want to mention that after my son passed and after his service and everything, everybody went on about their business. I started looking on Facebook, and there are tons of groups where people have started nonprofits or Facebook groups for people to join that have lost their child. And I noticed that Liberty Hill High School was having an event. And I have two brothers that have children in Liberty Hill. And they were in high school, and so I told them all about it. I went to that event. None of them showed up. I was hurt. I was alarmed because we had just buried my son, their cousin, their uncle, their second cousin. And I couldn't understand why they weren't there. Not to support me, but to learn about this. And that's where I met Stephanie and another mom. We've become great friends now, and I don't know what I would do without her, but my point is I realized that until people are personally affected and lose a child or a sibling, they're going to, just think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to my child. I hope you leave here not thinking you're going to go home and just say, oh, yeah, I know about fentanyl. Please continue to educate yourself. Talk to your children. I know that my son did not want to die. I know that Tucker did not want to die. Kyle did not want to die. And if it weren't for fentanyl, our children would be here today.
I have some slides that show the difference between these pressed pills. So you can buy a pill press on Amazon. You can get a stamp. I mean, it's really easy for people to press pills. So this is like the DEA, a real Adderall and a fake one. Trained professionals are not able to even identify the difference in them. Other thing we have to look at is social media. You have to have access to your kids' social media, to their cell phone. In these cases, it's really important too, in the event of a death, for officers to get into your kid's phone. We need the passcode. That is something that, a lot of this stuff happens. A child dies. They can't get into the phone. Meanwhile, the teenager is still selling pills. More kids are dying. And this goes on and on until charges are able to be brought in. So this takes a long time. There are all different types of apps kids have that they're using. I will say one in particular that's often talked about within law enforcement is Telegram. If your child has Telegram, there's not a lot of good stuff happening on Telegram. And so that is one to look for. They use emoticons to talk about this. And I don't want to leave without talking about xylazine. Xylazine is another drug that's coming. It is being added to drugs. It's being added to fentanyl. And you can see here that in the fentanyl powder, they have found xylazine in 23% of it, as well as 7% of the pills in 2022. Xylazine does not, naloxone, Narcan, it does not work. It's not an opioid, so you cannot use Narcan to push that and save. There's no life-saving medication from xylazine. Xylazine, the way it gets out of the body is it eats itself out. So they call it the flesh-eating drug, or the zombie drug. So that is happening. It's hitting the East Coast really hard right now. So drugs are a thing that our youth are facing, the biggest threat to our youth. And awareness is the antidote. And so I'll tell you a little bit. I went to my sheriff, and I was trying to get education into our school, and I wasn't able to get in. And so we all were having issues with schools, bringing this information in, and we are over here like, oh my gosh, we want to save anyone's life. The loss of a child is so far-reaching, and it's a spider web effect that affects so many for the rest of your life. Walking around with the loss of a child, like, you're never the same. So your other kids don't get the same mama that you once were. And so it's not just that we lost our child, like, we lost a part of us. And living forever for the rest of our lives like that is painful, and it's heavy. And friends have to learn. Friends are burying their friends. This is a world that it's so sad what our youth are facing. So I went to our sheriff and I said, you need to get into schools. I can't, then you need to. And the schools wouldn't let our sheriff in either. So he said, well, yeah, not Sheriff Sally. Yeah. She's your sheriff, and she's here, so thank you. I'm in Williamson County. I live in Leander. So Sheriff Gleason said, well, I'll give you a grant, and you can try to go do what you can. And I was really upset with the lack of information, and he said, well, the only way we could do it is to talk to lawmakers. And I said, well, I already have an appointment with my state representative on Tuesday. So I went to the state representative and I told him what we were facing and what we were experiencing. And he filed a bill, House Bill 3908, and it's requiring fentanyl education in grades 6 through 12. So that bill has been out of committee. We're waiting for a House hearing, but we're in the last bit of the legislative session right now, and fentanyl bills are tied up. I don't know why. I'm just telling you that they are. And there was a House Bill 13 that was being put through the House, and they amended it, and they added Tucker's Law to House Bill 13. So it passed the House. Thank you. I'm going to show you guys. This is the bill, and every single state representative signed it at the House level, so we're waiting for the Senate to get it through, but it's expected to pass. So that is in grades 6 through 12, and we're also in the process of building a curriculum right now called the Tucker Project, and it will be a Texas standard curriculum brought out to all of the schools. So when that comes, Lake Travis will be one of the schools that will get it first, donated to them. So thank you guys.
Is there anything that we could do for shock value at schools to get the kids' attention?
So we used to come out here every year and do Shattered Dreams right before prom, to where we would set up cars like a car wreck, and Shattered Dreams is a statewide program, and we cut them out and everything. And I've kind of talked with our chief, and it would be up to the school districts, that I don't see a whole lot of kids dying in car wrecks anymore. I see them dying from fentanyl overdoses. So I think we could do kind of that same thing, to where you set up like a party-like atmosphere. Kids just, that's what we did with Shattered Dreams. You moulage them all up. They go through the school the rest of the day dressed in white like a ghost. They can't talk to anybody. I don't know why that program quit. Several years and years ago, there was we had brought up doing something like that after we saw some heroin ODs out here. Nobody probably remembers that as like 2001, 2002, but it came out of Plano and it hit here, and we ran on like 3 kids that within a week got a hold of it. As the fire department, I would be all about starting Shattered Dreams back up and doing that kind of thing, and moulaging kids up and doing that. I don't know why it stopped, but to your point, yeah, that's what that visual effect is, what kids need,
Thank you.
I agree, but what you're hearing tonight is Shattered Dreams, right? These parents, and being able to get these moms in the school to talk to the kids. But the other thing that I want to encourage, because what I want you to leave here with is education, right? I want you to be able to go back and talk to your children about what you heard tonight. You know, for 21 years before being the sheriff, I was a DA investigator. And during, my son's 38 years old, but I would go home and I would talk about the cases, especially like intoxication, manslaughter. Those were cases that I was involved in, and I talked about them, and I talked about them, and I talked about them to a point where he was not going to go out and drink and drive. I think that you've got to go home. You've got to tell these stories. You've got to let them, I mean, you've got to educate your children, and you've got to have conversations with them about how important it is and what's happening. It's vital. You want to touch on that?
So about 2 years ago, I was invited down to Kyle schools, and I basically sat in a classroom, and the classes all kind of rotated through. And then I'd ask the teacher to leave, and I'd say, okay, statistically, 2 of you are going to be dead in the next 5 years. Now, what do you want to know about drugs? And then we'd start having this conversation about it. I think as parents or educators, you got to almost take the taboo out of it, and you need to be able to have a real matter of fact. You know, when I was in high school, a lot of the scare stuff and the reality stuff was thrown at me, and that wasn't going to stop me because social influence was so high. The other thing I wanted to throw out is that, you know, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have caught me dead sitting next to her. But, you know, I would drive, if I was driving and a cop would pass me, I would, you know, follow him. I'd have a mini heart attack. But now, you know, having working relationships with law enforcement, they're not the enemy. And I think if you're struggling with things, or you're finding these, or somebody's, you know, distributing these pills, or you do identify one in your kid's possession, you've got to talk to law enforcement too. And there's so many times where this happens, and you know, they call us, and we get law enforcement involved. There's no, you know, it works out really, really well. But I think that you just have to remove the taboo out of it, and you have to have a real matter-of-fact conversation with your kids about that stuff. Otherwise, they're just not going to talk to you about it.
Hi, thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Jennifer Lyon. I'm the Director of Health and Social Emotional Learning, and I want to answer this question on behalf of the district. I want to let you know that we have tried scheduling this panel to come talk to our students this year, but the schedule being so tight, we will start the school year with this already scheduled for our secondary students. We just could not make that happen this year with all the many things that we have to juggle in the calendar. So that is already on the books. We are so excited that we're going to get the curriculum, and then we will vet that through the SHAC really quickly in the fall so we can make a plan for implementing that as well. I also want to be proactive in telling you that all of our nurses and all of our law enforcement officers carry, I'm not going to say it right, Narcan. Sorry, I always want to say the generic version. They all carry Narcan. Every campus has it. And they are trained to use it. So we are ready and able to intervene if something happens. I'm going to stay up in case more questions come from the district.
What about middle school?
Yes. We will not be doing this lesson with elementary, but we will be doing all secondary, middle, and high school. I do also want to remind you, parents, because I'm also over the sexual ed curriculum, it's just like when you talk to your kids about sex or alcohol, you might think that your kids are most influenced by their peers. But your behavior and your conversations and your interactions with them are the most meaningful in determining what their behavior and their choices are going to be. So when you talk to your kids about this and have really direct conversations, you make more of an impact than you realize.
Hi, my name is Michelle. My question was kind of answered, so I just wanted to take this time to thank you. But I teach 6th grade health, and so I work with younger kids, and they get one lesson a week. I just finished up tobacco and vaping, so we're going to go into alcohol. And so my question that I was going to ask is kind of on the same topic, is younger kids, what do you find is the best approach? Because they don't understand as much as high school kids do, and a lot of them don't have social media yet. A lot of them do, though. But my question was kind of like addressing like your younger population, sixth grade.
That's great. Thank you for your question. With our curriculum, we're actually just completing grade 7 right now. So this is stuff that we're working on. There's a team working on it. I'm not building any curriculum, but they do run it kind of by me. But it's really important that they understand, just as you're talking about drugs, that there's this poison being added to drugs. So we have the drugs that you know about, that we tell you about, but then there's this poison that can be added, and this is what it does. So what is fentanyl? What is the effect on the brain? You can even give a science response to that, and just the basics, where they know this much fentanyl can kill, and it's being added to, these drugs. I think that's just basic knowledge, having that understanding, like I say, people say, well, I want to scare them. Like, I tell my kids, don't run on the road, you'll get hit by a car. Don't talk to strangers. Like, I'm telling, this is education, letting them know this information to keep them safe, for their safety. So it's just that open conversation, and just so they can understand, because fentanyl, when we were kids, it's just knowing the information. So.
Thank you for coming out and educating us and giving us a little bit more tool and confidence to talk to our children. Incidentally, my son, he's 14, he asked me last night, Mom, when can I start drinking beer? I wasn't sure how to answer it, but I said to him the best is just not to start. How would you answer a question like that?
So it's funny you say that, because my 14-year-old daughter, asked me the same question. And I told her my own personal recovery story. I said, well, let me tell you what that could be like. I think that, just saying, well, it's best not to do that, I don't know that is necessarily the right answer when it comes to alcohol. I think talking to them about how alcohol works, about the effects of those things, some of the bad things that can happen, and using it at a responsible age, also mentioning that it's illegal, and that those, getting in trouble with that could have a permanent, lasting effect. And but when my kid or any of my kids' friends ask me, I sit down and I'm really honest with them about, what alcohol did to me in my life, and what it took to to get through all those things. So I think, just again, having a blunt, very direct and non-taboo, matter-of-fact conversation is really just the best to go. There's a few good movies that I've recommended to my kids, but I don't know, that would be up to you to decide on what's most appropriate for them. Well, the one that we talked about, so they were talking about opiates. The one show that we started with, there were a few episodes you couldn't see, but was Dope Sick with Michael Keaton, and that hits home pretty good. Another one is there's a movie called A Beautiful Boy. It's worth watching.
Good evening. My name is Amelia Floyd. I'm actually the president of the Engage and Heal Foundation, and we're a mental health foundation based out here in Lake Travis. Thank you for sharing your story. It's just as important to share your story as it is the next story and the next story and the next story. And unfortunately, we don't want more next stories. But unfortunately, this has also touched me very close, where my daughter, who is a graduate of Lake Travis, lost her best friend to a fentanyl overdose 2 years ago. So I appreciate you talking about this. The other question I wanted to ask is, there is talk of kits, of testing for potential fentanyl in drugs. Is that something that is coming to fruition, or is that just something that's rumored?
It's not a rumor. It's right now at the Capitol. The test strips are, we're trying to make them legal so that, I mean, they're right now viewed as they're illegal for anybody to have the test strips, but they're in the legislature and I think they're through the House, correct me if I'm wrong, and they're stuck in the Senate. And so it's important to reach out to your senators and just encourage them to make those test strips legal, because I think it's very, very important.
We, at our hospital, we're one of the few that have the capabilities of testing urine for fentanyl. If anybody needs a test, we're happy to do it for free. We also will be acquiring the same thing that Border Patrol have, which is this little box, uses UV radiation to read any pills, and it can tell what's in it, exactly which of the 220 types of fentanyl are in it. So, but yeah, if anybody needs fentanyl testing or suspect their kid or somebody of using fentanyl, feel free to reach out to us.
Texas Against Fentanyl is starting a partnership with SwabTech. You can check them out online at SwabTEK. It tests for powdered substances in 30 seconds. It's a little swab. They started when cannabis became legal in Colorado, and there was an influx of students using cannabis on campus. So it was a swab to test for cannabis. Now they have gone to powdered substance, and so that is an area where if you were to find it, you could test it. So thank you. Mm-hmm.
My question's for the sheriff. I'm Shane Housemans. I work for the Austin Police Department. I do investigations in aggravated and violent crimes. My question for you is, it is absolutely no secret that our DA is not exactly the toughest on crime. I know for a fact that we've had multiple charges sent before the DA, and he's declined to prosecute. He's dismissed charges. What kind of conversations are you, as the sheriff of this county, having with him to keep these guys that are selling this stuff behind bars? Because I know it's not happening right now.
I do have several conversations with the DA, and I will tell you that the one conversation that I have with him is that any fentanyl case that they will prosecute. So that fentanyl cases. So
the information that I'm getting from our OCD detectives is that the only way they're being prosecuted at all is if they've got enough to go federal. If it's just a small amount, he's dismissing their charges. If it's a delivery amount, he's dismissing the charges.
So his policy is any, and this is his policy, not mine, but his policy is anything less than a gram he won't prosecute, with the exception to fentanyl.
Okay.
So
is he taking it as the gram of fentanyl, or is he taking it as the gram of Xanax that has the fentanyl? Because like we've discussed, it's the Xanax and all the pills that are being laced. Is he taking it as the gross weight of just the one pill? How is he doing it? Because he's dismissing charges. These animals are going back out on the street and they're hurting our children.
I'm going to tell you what he's told me, okay? So any fentanyl, he said that he'll prosecute. That's what he's told me.
Okay.
Any other drug less than a gram, he's not taking those charges. Now, I don't know what he's prosecuted and what he has not. But I know as a law enforcement entity, we at the sheriff's office are taking everything. I
understand. As are we. We're taking everything from rapes, ag assaults, murder, everything to the DA, and they're giving people probation for like the most amazingly heinous crimes. So what is it about that's going to keep him from doing the exact same thing with fentanyl? It's killing children. Children. It's like the man has no heart.
Again, you're asking me a question about another agency.
You're the elected official. You're the sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
He's the DA. You're both at the top as far as law enforcement in this county. It's like the left hand's not talking to the right. You're telling him we need to do such and such, and he's like, well, yeah, we probably should, but that's not what I was elected on.
Again, he is an elected official. all on his own. That's what the voters,
Unfortunately,
voters
yeah,
have
the voters
have a
voted for it.
have a voice on that, just like they do with me. But I will tell you, when fentanyl is a very big concern of mine, and so I have had conversations, and he that is what he's told me. Any fentanyl case, they will prosecute. So we need to just watch and see, right? A number of the fentanyl cases, I agree, are going federal.
Yeah.
But
Because the
like
county
with
doesn't want
Stephanie's son, that is it's pending. It's pending trial, and he's in jail, and it's federal, and there's a number of them going federal.
Yes.
But I can only say what he tells me, right? And we're going to do our job, and I would encourage you to continue to do your job.
I'm doing my job every day, and whatever the county decides to do with the charges, the felonies that I put before them, that's on them. I did the best I could. I'm sure your deputies are doing the best they can. We're doing a disservice with that gentleman as the DA.
How long have you been in law enforcement?
Coming up on 16 years now.
So you're going to continue to do just like you've always done, right?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I just want to piggyback from a citizen side of that, not on the law enforcement side. These are elected officials, and this is happening in my county too. The DA isn't picking up these charges. So our police officers are out there. They're going to houses like mine with mothers screaming their head off, having to deal with us all emotional, and calling them every day. What's going on? What's going on? We're working. We're trying. The DAs aren't picking up these cases, so they're having to go ahead and take it federal. More time passes during that. So that's something that's important for citizens like us to understand the process. We don't understand that process because we're not in it. So that is happening. So it's very important to know what our DAs stand for, and when we're making a decision on voting, what that is. So that's what I just wanted to piggyback on that. Thank you.
So I'm guessing most of you are parents here in the district. I am too. I've lived out here for 17 years. I have a 14-year-old daughter here and a 14 at LTMS and a 16-year-old daughter here. And I work for your police department at the school district level. And I wanted to share with you what we do a little bit. I carry more life-saving stuff on my body than weapons. Like you said, we do have the Narcan. I carry 2 on my person. I have 2 in my vehicle, and I have 2 in my office. I have a medical kit on this leg. I'm running out of room. But we don't work out of our cars. We work in your schools. We work in the hallways. We work down below here. We work on the 2nd floor. So we do carry all that stuff with us. When we do encounter kids that are involved in drugs and the vapes, I mean, these are the things that keep me up at night and all of us. Pedestrian traffic around here and cars also keeps me up at night. But the dangers of fentanyl we talk to with the kids, no matter what drug they're encountering, because the fentanyl is being found in everything. And talking about education, they know more than you do about it already. I don't care what age they are. So open up that conversation and feel free to do it. The door is open for you. They already know. And they're either going to get information from their kids or from social media, their friends, or their social media. And so, look at this website, get all the information you can, and just have a conversation with them. Because this is the stuff that keeps our department and our school district awake at night. We're doing what we can to educate them, and sometimes it's in a law enforcement encounter with them. But we take that opportunity to educate kids. And I wanted you to know that you do have a presence. Currently, we have 3 officers at the high school, 1 in each middle. The additional officers we're hiring this summer will have more of a presence in the elementary school. I do talks at the elementary school, and when you ask about real younger kids, we use the BK Bobcat was taking too many vitamins. So you kind of put it on that level with them and just, know what you're putting in your body. So there's a way to talk to your kids. I don't care what age they are. Trust and respect them enough that they'll receive it. So I didn't really have a question. I just felt like I ought to inform.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's really important. We put a lot of information for resources for people to learn on our website, so txaf.org, and go to learn. There's lots of stuff that people can learn about, as well as I'll have to look to see if it's on there right now with Texas Pictures documentaries. There's a lot of real life stories on YouTube, and so we had it on our website, and then and on your website.
Travis County Sheriff's Office has launched a fentanyl page on our website as well. We have Stephanie and Caroloo's stories there, as well as links to information and resources, and so we encourage you to make that on your list of resources if you choose. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks for coming. I have a question about the Narcan. Are you suggesting that we should maybe, I know there's a shortage, but to carry that with us, or have kids bring it to parties, or?
It looks like everybody's shaking their heads.
Just one other question too.
Yeah.
If someone takes a pill, what's the time frame? Is there a time frame, or did I miss you saying that?
Mike or Dan, y'all want to speak to this?
Sorry, I would say about 15 minutes it can start kicking in. It's got to go through your digestive tract. The other scary thing that we haven't really talked about, but law enforcement deals with, is they don't have to take the pill. They can handle something with fentanyl on it, and it can be absorbed through their skin. So you need to have that conversation with them too about, even if, it's they're at a party and they're handing pills around, don't even touch it. Don't even grab it to hand off to another person. It's just, you hear about police officers all the time when we do search in a car and they get the powder, they breathe it, and all of a sudden they're unconscious, and so it's crazy stuff. It's just so concentrated. So what'll happen first is they'll be a little altered. They'll have pinpoint pupils, and you'll see their respiratory get really slow. We're supposed to breathe between 10 to 12 times a minute, and it'll just slow down to where it's like 6. They'll be real lethargic, probably want to lay down and sleep a lot, and that respiratory rate will just get slower and slower. And then once you get into a respiratory rate of about 6 times a minute, that's when you'll start seeing cyanosis. So you'll see blue in the nail beds, blue around the lips, stuff like that, and that's a sign that there's not enough oxygen in your body. So if you have a child that's real lethargic, laying around, looks a little blue around the mouth, nail beds, can't really arouse them, more than likely that's an opiate or like fentanyl. Right, Narcan's safe. It doesn't affect your heart. It doesn't. I don't know of any allergic reactions that people have to Narcan ever. It's in our protocol to give to every unconscious patient, whether we think it's fentanyl or not. We give it. So it's really safe. And what will happen is you'll, depending on how much you give, they can have a violent reaction coming out of it because you've instantly sobered them up. And so if they're a chronic user, you've put them into rehab immediately if you give them too much, but you can still deal with that. Yes, and if you do administer Narcan, go ahead and go to the hospital because it only lasts in the body for about 15 or 20 minutes, and you don't know the concentration of the opiate that's in the system, and so they can relapse and go right back into respiratory depression. Yeah, so if you do administer Narcan, call 911 and get them to a hospital.
I'm just going to add a little bit because you asked, should you have Narcan with you? We just had an award ceremony, and one of our officers got a life savings award, and it wasn't because he was on duty. It was he was at home, and a neighbor he had to administer it to a neighbor. So it's not just your children. you could come across this anywhere at any time. So having it, you too could save somebody's life.
Having overdosed a handful of times, I can tell you that, depending on what it is that's taken, the route that it's taken, it could be way less than 15 minutes. And it happens so fast, it's not like something that just subtly comes on. It happens so quick, and you're like, uh-oh. And you just know, and then that's it. And yeah, if you suspect that your kid is, testing opiates or has ingested fentanyl or ingested any kind of opiates, the first thing that you see is that flushed face and the pupils that are just you can always see it. They're just pinned. And so anyway, if you ever, maybe everybody's going to go home and give their kids an eye check, but yeah, that's the biggest thing is you see those pinned pupils. Yeah.
All right, well, we have hit the time frame we were aiming for. What looks like we have one more question, and we're happy to take it.
So how does somebody just whip up this synthetic fentanyl? And does it come from like certain parts of the country more or parts of the world?
So there's chemical precursors. They have the same chemical makeup of the fentanyl pharmaceutical that we see. And primarily China and India are the countries that it's coming from. So it comes from points of entry into our country. The mail system as well. It's coming. People can order in the dark web. You can order things that get sent right to your house, as well as our borders. So it's everywhere. And we cannot, people say like, oh, I don't want to be political. Well, it's not political. We have to look at where it's coming from, what's going on, where's the increase, and what can we do about it. And so it's important that we say that that's where it's coming from. So, and I want to add one other thing that I talk to kids about when I go to schools. I say, using fentanyl, you're using it because you're stressed, you broke up with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, you have home issues, all of the school social pressures. These are things that our kids are facing on a daily basis. So we list them, we have all these issues. So then you take drugs to try to, numb out these issues that you have. Well, what you did is you still have those same problems. Now you've just created another problem. So now you've involved a drug addiction. So I'm like, when using fentanyl, you create an addiction, takes your life, or causes brain damage. Those are the three things that happen from fentanyl. And you still have all those other problems. So I encourage them, and I also think it's really important that we have real life talks. What was bothering you 4 years ago? What grade were you in 4 years ago? Okay, you were in 6th grade 4 years ago. Are you still struggling with the issues that happened in 6th grade? Like, as we get older, we have wisdom, and we understand that our problems pass, and we get over them, and we get better. And their life matters. Let them know that they matter, that they're needed, and that drugs don't make it better. It's just really important right now. Our babies need to know they matter.
I just have a quick question. You said that you can get Narcan, you need a prescription, but you don't need it from a doctor. So how do you go ahead and get that?
So there's a standing order at the pharmacy. So all pharmacists can fill the prescription without having to get it from your doctor.
So you just go and...
Yes.
Okay.
And I do believe that it will be over the counter soon as well.
Sorry, I just had a quick question. For the district and law enforcement for our kids here, I hear stories that marijuana's being used in bathrooms, they're closing down bathrooms, kids see kids doing marijuana vaping in classrooms. Something like this seems, there's no vapor, you can't smell it, it's easy to conceal. What resources does the school, the law enforcement have? Because I understand now lockers, they charge for lockers, so a lot of kids aren't putting drugs in their lockers, they're just keeping it on their person, and law enforcement hands are tied about searching kids. And for drug testing, if you or in sports, or you have a parking pass, you're subject to random drug testing, but everyone else isn't. So just curious what measures the school has in law enforcement for tracing and detecting something like this.
We work hand in hand with the administrators of the school. And so if there's we're dealing with the same Travis County District Attorney. And so there are thresholds, especially if it's a juvenile versus an adult at 17, on drug charges. They do get consequences legally when we can put charges on them that we know, and we'll run them through our assistant district attorney that's going to prosecute it or not. We have our own line of communication with the Juvenile Justice Center. But we don't have our own canine on campus, but we utilize Lakeway PD, and Canine Reno comes into school. Try to get him once a month or so. Do we find a lot of stuff? No, that dog works hard. It's been explained to me. It'd be like me searching every classroom in a wing of this school. That dog can work for a couple of hours, and we'll find vapes here and there. We'll find vapes everywhere. Sorry, but I think the presence of the dog. We try to be visible. That's what we're doing as law enforcement in here in our department. When we find something, we address it, but we're trying to be very visible and proactive in our policing so that they see dogs, so they know that there's a presence. We have offices on campus. We're not in them. When I say I work in the hallway, I'm in the hall, or I'm in a classroom, or I'm in a gym, or I'm on a field. So we get tips all the time, which are utilized. They're great. We act on them immediately with the admins from the school and work in tandem with them. If it becomes the school actually has a lower bar for searching your kids than I do. As a law enforcement officer, I need probable cause. They need reasonable suspicion as an admin. And so we'll be present at a search, and I'll use my body camera to protect everybody there in the search. And but those anonymous tips are great because we try to reinforce that with the kids and the adults and the teachers. If they see something, say something. That's actually the name of the service we use, and it's awesome. And they're addressed immediately. Unless it's life-threatening, they hold them for us overnight, and then I get the dumps. Y'all get it 6 a.m. And we address them as soon as we get to school. If it's something during the school day, we address them right then also. So your kids are talking to us. And the more power you give them with the more information, then they're going to feel empowered to come report something. And there are the vast majority of kids in this district, in this school, want to be in a good learning environment. And that's what motivates all of us, and the teachers and the admins and everybody that's on staff here to come to work, is to provide a safe place for those kids to get an education. So, I think it's a fabulous team here, and the district keeps putting in place more tools for the kids and for the staff.
And I think just having this conversation right now, that your superintendent allowed us to come here, to be here, to talk about this issue, shows how much he cares about your kids. Because believe it or not, there are superintendents that are not letting us in. So just, trust that he does care about your kids, and he's here, and we'll continue to work with y'all and spread awareness. Texas Against Fentanyl is launching a teen ambassador program. We just had our first Zoom call where we met with the students, and it was so cool. We did this kind of brainstorming session. What are you seeing? How can we help and enact them to bring change? So that is up and coming. I don't have all of the details, but I am working, and I'm trying to create something that can grow bigger than us. So find us on social media, and we'll post our next Zoom call. Kids can kind of get in there. It was a really interesting, awesome session. So txaf.awareness is our Facebook and Instagram. So thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to stick around up here if anyone wants to come and talk and ask any of us any questions. Thank you again, and have a good night.